If you're interested in popular storytelling, there's a good chance you've heard of certain narrative models, like, say, Save the Cat beat sheets or Sid Field's paradigm in the world of screenwriting. And if you've ever taken a high school literature class, you've almost certainly heard of Freytag's pyramid. That's the whole rising action, falling action denouement bit. Um, but I recently encountered a model that I hadn't really thought of before that really fascinated me and continues to fascinate me. One of the reasons is that while those other models I mentioned are all based on story shape, this one centers around the arrangement of the characters who populate the story. And it comes courtesy of the novelist Chuck Palahniuk, probably most famous for writing Fight Club, in his book Consider This: Moments in My Writing Life After Which Everything Was Different, which is a great read. You should check it out. Even if you're not a writer, you might find it pretty fascinating. And in he takes the strategy, the rhetorical strategy of opening each chapter with "If you were my student," after which he relays a bunch of advice, asks questions, and offers tasks and homework, that sort of thing. And one chapter is titled "A Couple of Surefire Strategies for Selling Books to Americans." Now, I'm not sure why he limits it to Americans, which is, stick a pin in that. I'll come back to it. But one of the strategies that he offers is configuring a story this way. The classic American bestseller tends to depict, and I'm quoting now, three main characters. One character follows orders, is shy and agreeable, a general all-round good boy, girl, or boy. The second character is largely the opposite, a rebel who bullies and breaks the rules, always brashly hogging the spotlight. And the third is quiet, thoughtful, and acts as a narrator, relating the story to the reader. Okay, now that's all right, pretty straightforward. It was the next bit that really, really got me. The passive character commits suicide in some way. The rebel is executed in some way. That really got me thinking. And he then examines a number of examples of best-selling literature and blockbuster films, including Gone with the Wind, Rosemary's Baby, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Dead Poets Society. And you can see in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, for instance, that the focal character McMurphy, played by Jack Nicholson in the film, is the rebel. Billy Babbitt is the good boy, and Chief Bromden, who's observing all of this and actually acts as the narrator of the novel, something that was unfortunately lost in the movie, is that quiet observer character who eventually benefits from all of this, learns the lesson that the characters failed to learn, and reclaims the lost value, liberating himself in the end, at least temporarily. Something that I think is, and you can see that McMurphy is all but executed in the form of his lobotomy in the end, and Billy Babbitt literally does commit suicide. In Dead Poets Society, the character of Neil, played by Robert Sean Leonard, is the good boy, always doing what is expected of him and planning to follow in his father's footsteps, even though it's not really what he wants to do. You have John Keating, the focal character, played by Robin Williams, as the rebel, who's defying all of the normal modes of decorum and educational standards of this vaunted institution where he's teaching. And then Ethan Hawke's character, Todd, is the observer, who emerges in the end having grown and matured and entered into a state of higher self-realization based on what happens. And once again, the rebel character, Robin Williams' character, is figuratively executed when he's fired in the end. And the character of Neil, the good boy, literally commits suicide. Now, this is all great, but I actually think there are a couple of elements missing from the way that Palahniuk schematizes this. I think his analysis is actually incomplete. And one element is another character who's actually really, really critical to this, and that's a tyrant figure, somebody who lords over all of them and casts a dark shadow over the world, the milieu in which the story is taking place. Using those same examples, in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that tyrant is obviously represented by the iconic character Nurse Ratched, played by Louise Fletcher in the film. And in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it takes kind of a double form of Neil's father, who was the dad in that 70s show. I don't remember the actor's character's name, and who exerts so much pressure on him that he eventually collapses into shame and guilt and self-castigation and kills himself. The other thing that I think is missing from Palahniuk's account of this is that the rebel figure lures the good boy or girl into transgressing against the rules of that community for the first time. And it is that transgression, when it is called out by the tyrant, that precipitates the downfall of both characters. We see in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest that McMurphy tempts Billy Babbitt into sleeping with one of the women that he's smuggled into the hospital. And that's what eventually gets him in trouble with Nurse Ratched, who threatens to tell his mother, and which inspires him to commit that deed. And in Dead Poets Society, John Keating, Robin Williams' character, is the one who inspires Neil to audition for A Midsummer Night's Dream. His father sees that, demands that he leave the production, and that's what eventually causes him to snap and to end his life. Okay? So with those two elements, I see an even richer picture here. And since I noticed this, I've started to see it everywhere. A handful of examples. The play and film Doubt, written in the film directed by John Patrick Shanley. The character of Sister Aloysius, played in the film by Meryl Streep, is the good girl, always adhering to all of the rules and norms and procedures. And then you have the rebel character of Father Flynn, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is not such a stickler and doesn't want to adhere to tradition in the same way that Sister Aloysius insists upon. He wants to use ballpoint pens. He wants to wear his fingernails long. He wants to take 3 lumps of sugar in his tea, and he wants to have a secular song, Frosty the Snowman, in their Christmas pageant. And then you have the third observer character of Sister James, played by Amy Adams in the film. And the tyrant in this story is also twofold. Sister Aloysius herself acts sort of as a despot within the school where the story takes place, but then there's the higher tyranny of the unseen hierarchy of the Catholic Church, under which she and all of the women must suffer. Okay. Now, I think that there's something tremendously deep about this. It's not just a story of social regulation, which at first blush it may sound like. I think that there's a tremendous psychological depth to this. The opposition between the rebel and the good boy or girl seems to me to take to be a really basic archetypal expression of what Carl Jung called individuation, which is the process of maturing and growing beyond our childish, limited ego identities and attaining to our higher, fuller, more mature selves. Which involves getting over the childish impulses toward impetuously acting out against boundaries, as well as the equally childish kind of repressed tendency to just adhere to whatever is expected of you. And we see the dramatic enactment of those two forces clashing until both of them break down, and the observer character represents the mature psyche that emerges out of this process. And its archetypal nature is suggested to me by the fact that you can really see it all over the place, not just in 20th century American literature and film. Well, there are some other good modern examples of it. One that I noted is the musical Rent, which actually triples the arrangement, where you've got good boy Roger paired with bad girl Mimi. You've got good boy Collins paired with bad girl Angel, and you've got good girl Joanne paired with rebel Maureen, and then there's the rather feckless kind of tyrant Benny, who is kind of one of the weaker elements in the story, but does act as an engine, a vehicle for catalyst for the events of the plot, and going beyond again modern American storytelling. You can see this set of dynamics at work in probably the most famous work of English literature, Shakespeare's Hamlet, where Hamlet is the rebel who is killed in the end. Ophelia is the good girl who takes her own life. And the observer is Horatio. Oh yeah, the observer in Rent was, of course, Mark, who all of this is spinning around. Anyway, Mark Cohen. And going back to Hamlet, Horatio is the observer who will live on to tell this tale. And then you've got, again, a double tyrant of Claudius the king and his murdered brother, Hamlet Sr., the ghost of Hamlet Sr. specifically. And there are other places in world literature where this can be found. It's kind of a fun game to see when and how it pops up. It might be a good model for those of you who are creative writers out there to take for a spin yourselves and see if it works for you. And it's also an interesting framework within which to investigate the psychosocial depths of stories and how they're arranged. So I hope that was interesting to you. Go pick up a copy of this at the bookstore or at your library, as you can tell, which is where I got it from. And thanks for listening. And I'll be back soon with more thoughts about how stories work.